Following an internal memo questioning Google's gender policy, an engineer who released that memo has been fired, and Google promised to have a company-wide meeting to address the issue of gender in the workplace. Now, unfortunately, that dialogue will not happen, at least not yet, because Google has canceled this employee meeting because of fears that participants would be harassed online. So on Thursday, Google's chief executive sent an email to staff members canceling the meeting a half hour before it was to start. In fact, he released a statement saying that we had hoped to have a frank, open discussion today, as we always do, to bring us together and move forward. But our Dory questions appeared externally this afternoon, and on some websites, Googlers are now being named personally. Googlers are writing in concerned about their safety and worried they may be outed publicly for asking a question. So they are postponing this company-wide talk, but I think that this dialogue is incredibly important to have. And it's unfortunate that people are getting harassed, but welcome to the internet, Google, where people get harassed.
Ironic that you have to welcome Google to the internet. Yeah. So let's talk about a couple of other angles here. So what Breitbart revealed was some employees talking about a plan to blacklist people who do not support the company's diversity efforts. So that could be problematic, and I understand why they would want to cover that as news. Now it's an entirely different thing when you then start doxing people and saying, okay, let's find out who those people are and talk of consequences. And then this thing gets shut down because whoever's asking the questions are the people that they want to reveal their identities. And I mean, that's, again, we're getting into madness there when you go in that direction. You want to have a battle of ideas, let's have at it, Horst. So let's have a conversation and a debate, but why do you need to know who they are and where they live? And so it's just, that's deeply problematic. And then they canceled the meeting. In the meeting, they were going to talk about 3 different things, and one was how they did not have to lower standards for hiring women and minorities, and they wanted to explain that. You would think you'd want to hear them out on that. Is that true? You might be skeptical, but you'd want to hear what they had to say, right? And then, one other thing that they wanted to talk about was, are we making political conservatives feel unwelcome at Google? That seems like that's a conversation you would want them to have, but now they're not gonna have that conversation because you threatened to out the identities of people you disagree with.
I mean, they might have the conversation further down the line, but I would have much preferred for them to have that conversation now because it's more relevant now than ever before. And look, that's the thing that drives me crazy, right? So abusing people, threatening people, getting in their way when they want to share their ideas or their concerns is an issue. Just let people have an open and frank dialogue without having to worry about them getting doxxed or being met with any type of violence or threat. That's the reason why we never have any type of progress when it comes to these issues, because people are afraid to speak out, whether you're on the right or the left on this issue.
And I just want to clarify one thing. Breitbart didn't threaten violence, but they did out this memo, which again, I think it does have some news value. But at one Twitter account said, let's find out who they are and quote, ruin their lives. Now, again, if you're on the internet, that kind of talk is fairly commonplace, but still disconcerting. And especially if you're not a person who is used to being attacked online and you're just a civilian and all of a sudden somebody's talking about ruining your life, it's problematic. So I don't want to put it necessarily on Breitbart, but it is a reason why Google would be seriously concerned about the safety of their employees.
Well, this is a tactic that, unfortunately, let's be real, has been frequently invoked by the right, using doxing to harass people and put their personal safety in extreme danger. And they ran off, what's her name, Leslie from Saturday Night Live off of Twitter.
Jones,
yeah. By doxing, same thing that Milo was doing with potentially undocumented students at Berkeley. So that kind of tactic is reprehensible, right? And like you just said, it's going to actually prevent the conversation. And the other thing that I will mention, though, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I don't think they should have fired the guy.
I agree with you.
I think they should have lowered his pay and demoted his leadership position and to see if he could tolerate stress, right? Like that was his claim. that would
to see if he'd have a neurotic reaction to that?
But it's interesting because Breitbart called, like, the headline for this was "Social Justice Warriors Create Wrongthink," and of course they're trying to riff off of the Orwellian concept of doublethink and people not being able to think for themselves, and only like political conservatives, I guess, can think for themselves in an environment that embraces ideological diversity. But again, like you just said, they just prevented that by putting people's lives at danger.
Yeah,
so I think it's an important conversation, and it's super ironic that if you thought it was wrong to fire Demori because he was trying to have a conversation, you have now blocked the conversation that Google was going to have about it.
Right.
So, and I think it is a fair argument, and we've debated this on the show all week about what Google should have done with Demori. But I think a valid point of view is that he created a hostile work environment. Just think about it as Susan Wojcicki talked about. What if it was another category instead of women? It was someone, and she didn't say this, but I'll add it. If he had said, "Now look, let's just be honest about the biological differences of Jews," there's no question he gets fired, right? Everybody agrees. I mean, the world has lived through that. That didn't end well. So now I don't want to say that we should never have a conversation about the biological differences of women, but I don't know that especially if you're a boss, to Maytha's point, if you're supervising anyone, if those are your views about a certain group you're supervising, that could be problematic. If you like the Young Turks, you'll love Young Turks membership. TYTnetwork.com/join.